Welcome to the Riverbend Awareness Project.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast episode are solely those of the individuals participating and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Riverbend Media Group or the Riverbend Awareness Project, its affiliates, or its employees. It is important to note that the discussion presented is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified healthcare professionals for any medical concerns or decisions. The Riverbend Awareness Project is a product of Riverbend Media Group.
I think there's also a significant amount of misconception around abuse and what that looks like and what that is. And I think people tend to just cling to a knowledge of physical abuse. And it's oh, well, he's not showing up, battered and beaten, but that's not realistic in everything, because a lot of times that's not what we see. And it can be significant on other levels. In the state of Idaho, one of the largest reports of abuse stems from neglect. And again, some of those pieces that we spoke about earlier, not having homes, not having food, not having appropriate attire, that is a significant piece of it, because, children especially aren't able to navigate hardly anything, honestly, if they are hungry, if they're tired. And it's a part of what we tend to address first, whether it be at school or in the community. Because if I'm wanting you to engage, and you're tired, maybe you just need a quick little nap, or, a granola bar or something to get you on a baseline. Basic needs need to be fulfilled first.
I like what you were both saying about how it's not the end. When you call CPS, there's more things that you can do to support those children, and it's better for the parents too, because they can learn how to better take care of their children. And earlier, Julie, you were talking about how parenting, it doesn't come with a manual or a guide. It's something you kind of have to figure out. So do you have any advice for someone who wants to be a parent, but is scared that they won't know how to take good care of their child, or they might, have a bad day and blow up and abuse their child? And obviously, I think everybody has good intentions, but there are things that can happen that you might end up hurting someone that you love and you care about. So do you have any advice for what you can do maybe to prepare to be a parent, or get rid of some of that fear of child abuse to ensure that you can provide a good home for children?
Absolutely. I think the first is always ask for help. I think so many of us feel alone in so many things, not just parenting, but in life in general. I'm not connecting with these people, or there's not a place for me, or these groups with similar interests. But there's so much out there, and it is so beneficial to just ask. Because tons of people are willing and open to do that for you. There are significant organizations in the state of Idaho for, I think, working in a school community for special education and what parents need to do to navigate, and how to seek assistance for children and seek assistance for themselves, because that's difficult in its own right. And there are so many groups, whether it be religious or sports-oriented, where those community options are there, and people are way more willing than I think we understand or realize to be that help, to help guide what you're asking. And the majority of people are open to sharing those resources and being helpful and showing that kindness. And ultimately, that's it. When somebody asks me, I'm going to do everything within my ability to be able to make sure you're supported, because when we know better, we do better. And ultimately, that's the key in prevention, is that we know this and we want this to change. And getting to that point, we have to step in, and it's going to be, those advocates that are there to help you and to support you and to encourage your own learning.
And I would add onto that, which Julie did mention the education, but for people who want to be sure that they're going to be good parents, first of all, if they're worried about that, I can say that they probably are on their way to being a very good parent. Because usually it's when we just kind of aren't like looking forward and we just kind of walk into things. But people who are like, oh, am I going to be a good parent? They're on their way to being really good parents, and just, educating themselves, reading all you can about parenting, going to parenting classes, talking to parents that you admire. Maybe you came from this might be triggering for people because maybe we're talking about people who want to be parents who came from families that were abusive. And in that situation, like, you can find parents that you admire, parents that, and just look and realize, I grew up knowing this, but that's not the way that it has to be. Like, I can learn differently, and I can provide a different and a safe place for my children.
How does abuse influence family dynamics?
Ooh,
It's a big question. Sorry.
Yeah. So, you have the pictures of your head of happy families like the Brady Bunch. Maybe you're too young to remember the Brady Bunch.
Oh, I watched the Brady Bunch.
Okay, good. The Brady Bunch, all the different TV families that, seem happy or whatever. And those can provide like a good little, what's the word? Like a good little visual for people to be like, oh, this is what I want my family to be like. But when there's actual abuse in a family, like, that causes a lot of division in the family, a lot of fear, a lot of shame, a lot of isolation. And so if there's abuse and nobody's talking about it and there's nothing that's coming along, like the parents aren't trying to change it, they're not trying to educate themselves, they're not, then that puts a lot of shame on the children. And that open, loving type of parental relationship that Julie was talking about earlier, which is one of the very best protective factors, is to have that open and loving relationship with your child or your children. That will not exist in a home where there's abuse that is not being addressed.
Yeah, that lacking sense of safety. And it can be for all members of the family. And kind of coincides with that fear. And then a lot of times I see abusive dynamics kind of come out in like senses of control. And then that kind of begets other behaviors like sometimes eating disorders, because it is something that can be controlled by somebody who feels like other parts of their life are just chaotic, and things like that. So it really shows up in so many ways that it's just an interesting dynamic, but a lot of fear, a lot of control issues are things that we see often. And then a lot of times, especially with kids who are struggling to identify feelings, emotions, any of that, and it comes out in behavior, which is huge for children. And you see that across the board, whether it be, having potty accidents to throwing chairs or, yelling at the people that they do feel safe around. And sometimes that is like in classrooms with teachers, with counselors, or outside services, because that is where they feel safe enough to just let it go.
On the flip side, what are some characteristics of healthy family dynamics?
Healthy family dynamics is, again, back to the safety piece. A lot of times you can see like kids who are around their parents and feel free to kind of be a kid because they know that they are safe to do that. They aren't going to be targeted or punished for, being too loud or being too playful or things like that. So I would say just that level of comfort in your dynamic can be huge. Or if your kiddos feel like they can talk to you about things, whatever it is, like that non-judgment piece is also huge, because if they're going to come to you with little things, they're going to come to you with big things. And so just kind of creating that space is huge. And a lot of times, I don't know, kind of creating space feels like a buzz term, but it is really effective for everybody across the board. Even as an adult, I want to be around people that see me or connect with me or know me. And children feel the same way, almost even more so, because they haven't been socialized to be like, hey, that's not real. So that's a huge thing. And then I think just people's willingness to be educated, to understand more, to do things differently, particularly away from like your families of origin, because a lot of what we know comes from those places. And if it wasn't great, we have to take it upon ourselves to navigate things differently. And I think that's important.
I agree. Yeah, and just like you can tell, happy kids, happy family, like they're not perfect, but they feel comfortable around each other, like what Julie was saying, and they don't have that fear of like retribution. And I think the greatest compliment that kids can give their parents is to be able to tell them anything, to be able to ask them anything without fear of being punished. And those are the kinds of things that build that safety and that security with kids and families. Another thing that I wanted to mention, I think one of the most dangerous things about the family dynamics that happen when there's abuse is that kids are often coached and told who they can trust, and actually not who they can trust, but who they can tell what and who and what to say. And so we've had lots of situations like that where kids have come to school and they've been coached what to say, but then they actually end up saying, well, my mom told me that I couldn't tell you this, but they still, a lot of times they'll end up telling us. But that, I think that's terrifying, that kids will question their own instincts as to who they can trust, because there is that fear in a family where there's abuse and that shame and like, nobody can know this. If you tell anybody this, you're going to get taken away from us. I think that's one of the biggest things that parents will tell kids in families of abuse. And the flip side of that I also wanted to talk about is, how you had said before, calling CPS isn't the end. And I appreciate that you said that, because I'd never really thought of it like that. But also like the power that comes when a person is committed to change, and when a person brings themselves to a humility where they can apologize, like be able to apologize to their child and say, I have messed up so much, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to take classes. I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to make all of these choices. And I think that's something that isn't given enough like props, when that people can change. And I think that's a fear for parents who have been abusive, is they fear that they can't, like, it's not okay to apologize to a child. Like, they have to be the ones always making the right decision, that they can't ever make mistakes. And I think that kind of is a huge disservice, because we all make mistakes. And the more that we're willing to apologize and say we're sorry and be accountable for our choices and say, like, I'm not going to let this happen anymore. I'm going to make some changes.
So we talked about some, like CPS as a resource and school counselors. Are there other resources you guys like to talk about to help children and families?
Yes.
We use a lot of resources. Locally, we have like the crisis center and things like that. And now we have Rise Up, which is a youth crisis center, and that's been huge for us. And there's like the Live Teen Center, which is also amazing for like those from 7th grade to 12th grade. And then SPARC is another resource kind of within that helps connect families with community resources, which is also huge because a lot of times there aren't known resources. It's like, how do we navigate this? How do we see this? And then there are a lot more within the state for different things. Like I had talked earlier about like Idaho Parents Unlimited. They are a great resource for like special education and neurodivergent kiddos and different things. And they do a lot of push, even like with legislation and things like that in our area, which is huge because it's definitely needed. And a lot of times that becomes an issue in some of those abusive situations when people don't have those resources and are confused by that. You have some other good resources.
Well, I was just going to say something that SPARC and Rise Up do. So Rise Up is a crisis center which a lot of people use it for kids who are having suicidal thinking and things like that. But something that most people don't know, it can also be a resource if there is family strife going on, if there's fighting in the family, if the parent's like, oh my gosh, if I'm going to lose it with this child, you can actually take them to the crisis center and have your child stay overnight there in a situation where you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose it. Because maybe, if people haven't had teenagers, some people, it's easy to just love toddlers, and then you get a teenager and then they backtalk you and you're like, I would never hurt a child. But then you've got a teenager yelling at you and calling you every single name in the book. But so it's a great resource to be able to take your child to Rise Up. And actually the great thing about Rise Up too is that all the kids that I've ever talked to who've gone there, we've made a lot of referrals from our school for families to go there. They love it there. And the staff is great, and it looks like home. It's like inside of a home, and just super comfortable. And the counselors there are great, and they just work with the kids and play games with the kids and talk with them about the decisions they've made. And it's just a great space for kids to take some time away from their family when stuff like that is happening. And that's the same with SPARC. They have services like that as well, which I think most people in our community are not aware that we have these services.
We'll add a link in the episode description.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then we were talking about for younger families, because that can be tough with toddlers, and especially if you have more than one. And but Julie had mentioned before, and I had forgot about this group, the MOPS group, and I forgot what it stands for, but it's a national mothers group, but it has little chapters locally, And so that's a group that you can get in contact with. And they have like play dates and play groups and things like that. And that's a great resource for moms of, or parents of toddlers. I shouldn't just say moms. And then the other one we were talking about was the infant toddler program. And so if you're, I think that most people don't know about this program as well. If you're a parent of a young child, an infant or a toddler, and you're feeling like maybe something's off, maybe they're not reaching their milestones, or they are different from their peers, or even if you just want to make sure everything's okay, this is you can contact the infant toddler program, and they will do testing with your child, and they offer a lot of services. And that's just another, even if your child, there wasn't anything, they're developing normally and everything like that, still to get involved with that is just to have more resources, and they have more resources than just like for disabilities and things like that. But that is their main, to find those kids who aren't reaching their milestones and who aren't developing in a normal way.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share about child abuse prevention?
I would say my biggest is just education, educating yourself, educating others, and taking those opportunities to kind of engage maybe outside of what you know. And honestly, huge piece is be that safe adult. Be somebody who carries themselves in a way that you can be talked to, that somebody feels confident and safe coming to you with things that are happening to them or in their lives. And it can just be a small thing and can be super helpful long term.
And I think the thing that I kind of want to end with is just kind of going back to when people don't want to get involved or when they're afraid, just to remember that if you know about the situation, you're already involved anyway. And it will affect you. It will continue to affect you somehow if you have knowledge of the situation. And then, but the very last thing is that when things are hard, and it can be anything, we often feel like we have to carry it on our own. And that is never the case. And even as school counselors, when we have kids, it can be really overwhelming when they come to school and we know that there's abuse going on and we have to report it and everything. But then I think to myself, like, we'll make the report. And then I'm like, oh, we made the report. Now these other people are going to step in. So I will continue at the school to watch the situation and the child, but it never just ends with us. Like, we're not the final say. We're not the people who are like going to solve the whole problem. Like, there are always, everybody has their job to do. And that's why it's so important, if you see something, if you hear something, to report it, because it might feel overwhelming, but you aren't the end. You're going to pass it on to somebody else. And then those people are going to deal with it, or they'll pass it on to somebody else, and it will get to the people who can help, give it the most help, and that can solve the problem.
Definitely a collaborative effort.
Yes.
A lot of people that need to be involved or will be involved, so it isn't just based on one piece.
Yeah.
I like that. I like how it goes back to like broadening the circle of support too. Because you guys are still there supporting and helping in your capacity. And then when you report it, you're just broadening that circle of
Yes.
support for that child.
Yeah.
Definitely building that community ideally and increasing that access almost to the resources that are necessary.
Thank you both so much for coming in today and for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you.
Thank
That
you
was
so-
good.
yeah.
Much needed conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us.
We appreciate the sincerity, and we appreciate what you guys do too as school counselors.
Oh,
Thank you.
If you would like to listen to this episode or past or future ones, you can find the Riverbend Awareness Project anywhere you get podcasts or on the Riverbend Media Group podcast page.
Remember to rate, share, and subscribe to the Riverbend Awareness Project.